On a quiet Sunday morning in Brazil, visitors at a zoo watched something they would never forget. A 19-year-old young man climbed a 6-meter wall, almost 20 feet high, slipped past the safety fences, and calmly shimmied down a tree into the enclosure of a lioness. Moments later, he was dead. This wasn't a stunt, it wasn't a dare, and it wasn't a movie. It was real life, and behind that shocking video that raced across the internet, there was a human being with a long, painful story that almost no one knew. Today, we're traveling to João Pessoa, pronounced João Pessoa, in northeastern Brazil, to uncover the life and death of Gerson de Melo Machado, known as Vaqueirinho, the young man who walked into a lioness cage and never came back. João Pessoa is a tropical city framed by Atlantic beaches and dense Atlantic forest. In the middle of that urban landscape sits Parque Zoobotânico Arruda Câmara, a century-old zoo and botanical garden locals simply call Bica Park. It's marketed as a green sanctuary for families, lakes, birds, monkeys, and lions. On November 30th, 2025, around 10 in the morning, that sanctuary became the scene of a tragedy that would make headlines around the world. Witnesses watched as Gerson scaled a wall about 6 meters high, passed over security fencing, and then slid down the trunk of a tree inside the lion's area. In the enclosure was a lioness named Leona, lying in the sun. Visitors and staff screamed at him to stop. Some employees ran toward the area, but by the time security could react, Gerson was already inside the habitat, approaching the big cat. What followed lasted only seconds. The lioness reacted like what she is, a powerful predator faced with an intruder. She attacked. Staff tried to intervene, and emergency services were called, but there was very little anyone could do. Gerson suffered catastrophic injuries and was pronounced dead at the scene. We're not going to describe those final moments in graphic detail. What matters for this story is not the gore of the attack, but how a lifetime of neglect ended at the feet of a lioness. Within hours, the video was everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp groups, Reddit. Millions of people watched it. Some people were horrified. Others were angry. What an idiot. He got what he deserved. And then there were the memes, because that's what the internet does. But almost nobody stopped to ask the bigger question. Who was this kid? And what brought him to that moment? Gerson's life was not about dreams. It was about survival. As he moved in and out of shelters, he also drifted onto the streets. Reports describe small, non-violent crimes, petty thefts, minor incidents, often interpreted by social workers as desperate attempts just to get food, a bed, and a place to stay, even if that meant being arrested. He spent time in the Penitenciaria Roger in João Pessoa before being referred, at least in theory, to mental health services. But according to professionals who later spoke out, that treatment never really happened the way it should have. One prison worker even recorded a video before the tragedy, warning that Gerson was in a kind of bureaucratic limbo, too sick for regular prison, but without access to the long-term psychiatric care he needed. He called it a tragedy waiting to happen. Meanwhile, Gerson kept talking about lions. Brazilian outlets and international media mentioned that he once tried to hide in the landing gear of a plane heading toward Africa. A completely unrealistic and extremely dangerous idea, but consistent with the intensity of his obsession. And for him, there was one place in Brazil that represented that dream better than anywhere else: the lions' enclosure at Bica Park. Investigators in Brazil have not ruled out that what Gerson did may have been a suicidal act, driven by psychosis, by hallucinations, delusions, or a distorted belief that he somehow belonged with the lions. Others who knew him argue that, in his mind, this was not about death at all. It was about finally living his fantasy, being close to the animals he idealized since childhood. They say he talked about riding the lioness, taming her, and even taking her to Africa, as if reality, danger, and death were faraway concepts. The truth is, we may never fully understand what he was thinking as he climbed that wall. But what we can see very clearly, Sak, is everything that failed before he got there. a child with hereditary mental illness placed into institutions and then mostly forgotten. A teenager bouncing between shelters, streets, and prison cells, treated more like a criminal than a patient. A young man who repeatedly asked for help and never really got the long-term support and treatment he needed. In many ways, Gerson didn't just walk into the lion's den. He was pushed there by years of systemic neglect. In the hours after the attack, João Pessoa's city government shut down Bica Park, launched an investigation into its safety protocols, and called in animal behavior experts to monitor Leona. Officials stressed that the enclosure met national standards, and that no zoo can fully anticipate a person intentionally climbing into a predator's habitat. At the same time, the incident sparked a heated debate in Brazil. Were the existing barriers really enough? Could staff have intervened faster? And most of all, how was a young man with such visible psychiatric needs out on the streets, completely unmedicated and unsupervised? One decision, however, was clear. Leona would not be euthanized. Authorities and zoo veterinarians emphasized that she was not a killer, but a wild animal reacting instinctively to an impossible situation. She has remained under observation for stress and behavioral changes, but continues to live in the enclosure, away from the public while evaluations continue. As for Gerson, his funeral was small and heartbreaking. News outlets reported that only his mother and a cousin were present, along with a few neighbors and curious onlookers. A young man whose death moved the world online left this world with almost no one at his grave. So what is the real mystery here? It isn't how a lioness can kill a human. Nature already answered that. It isn't even how someone could climb a 20-foot wall. Videos show that clearly. The real mystery is how a life can fall through so many cracks. How a boy with obvious psychiatric issues grows up in institutions. How he goes in and out of prison instead of a hospital. How he warns the world in his own confused way. I want to live with lions. And still, nothing changes until the day he actually reaches them. In the end, the map we followed today wasn't just the map of a zoo in João Pessoa. It was the map of a system that lost track of Gerson long before he ever stepped into that enclosure. If you watched this far, thank you for staying with us through a difficult story. Here on Mystery in the Map, we don't just chase strange events and viral videos. We try to understand the human stories, the hidden roots, and the broken paths that lead to tragedy. If you believe stories like Gerson's deserve to be told with respect and context, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the mysteries hiding in plain sight around the world. And now I want to hear from you. Do you think this was a deliberate act, a psychotic break, or a dream that collided with reality? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, some of the darkest stories happen in the places we think are the safest.